Welcome back to Hard Candy. I'm your host, Joan Burnette, and with us today is our very first guest that we're thrilled to have, Rachel Roth Aldhizer. And Rachel and I have known each other for probably about a decade.
Yes.
And I first met her through a friend, and I was instantly impressed with. She had an intensity, she was intelligent, she had a passion for learning, and she knew how to get things done. So we worked together for about a year.
She was my boss.
No,
very good
that is not how we're playing this. We were together, smackhead. And so my initial response of who she was, my initial impression, was proven to be true again and again and again and again and again. She was very impressive. I just loved her. She left after a year to go with her equally amazing husband, George. They left for Manhattan. We kind of lost touch, really, except for a Christmas card or something like that. She moved back to Winston-Salem, where we reconnected. Mm-hmm. Now, at this point, blue skies, nothing but blue skies. She had this great pedigree. She's a published writer. She's got, at this point, 2 beautiful children, and nothing's going to stop us now. And then things shifted where that bright, beautiful future got some cloud overhead. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Rachel?
Sure. So as Joan said, when my husband and I moved back to Winston, we had 2 kids, and I was like, hey, this is pretty easy. Might as well go for a third, which is probably my first, point of pause there. And so we did, and we found out in February of 2021 that our 3rd son, David, would be born with a really rare set of congenital abnormalities. And it's really hard to even quantify something like this, because I think it's kind of every parent's worst fear that you go into an ultrasound, you hope you're just going to find out your baby's gender, and the doctor's like, oh man, like we see some really significant problems. And so, as you can imagine, I really can't picture a harder thing to hear. Like I had had a pretty easy life, I would say, up until that point. And so I think
I would agree.
Yes. And so it's kind of a place where the rubber meets the road. Like, wow, this is the first time that something it's like you're kind of trucking along, and then there's this really hard stop and everyone like slams in the car. That's really how it felt. And I've been thinking about, telling this story, like that first day, then when we learned that, on ultrasound that David would be really different, I just really felt like my world, like it really feels, and it was world ending. I don't think that's like an overstatement. It's like, I kind of think about it as I was someone else for like 29 years. And then in one day, everything changed. And so I don't recognize in some way the person that I was before this. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm like someone totally new. And so it's like with the birth of David, not only did he bring about something really unexpected and different in our family, but our community. It's like it was really a rebirth, I think, for myself and my husband. Experiencing David's birth is how I would talk about that.
Right
now.
Are you comfortable explaining a little bit more about his condition? Because that might help.
Yes,
the severity of it.
Yeah. So, it's like I said, it's just so hard to quantify things like this. I think if I had to put a number on it, I mean, there are so few kids like David in medical literature that really you just get case studies. And so if you've been in this scenario, something you don't want to hear if you've ever been in a medical space is, it's bad news and we don't know what this means for his future, for the rest of his life. And at the time, our physician's best guess was that David would be stillborn or that he would die shortly after birth. And so we really were prepared for a variety of options, but pretty much none of them would have ever forecast that David would be today almost turning 5. So that was something that, 5 years ago I would have laughed, because how the physicians were approaching, talking to us. And there's research to back this up that, like, I know we've chatted about this, but especially in pediatrics, I think physicians feel really responsible for kind of explaining the worst case scenarios. And so, we knew some about David before he was born. And then the day that he was born, we learned so much more about him, and none of it was good. And so we were hoping that in those first few hours, maybe everyone would have been wrong, right? Maybe the scans would have been wrong. Maybe the prognosis about his life would have been wrong, and it wasn't. And so the first thing we learned right after David was born, we knew that, previously from the ultrasound, that he would have a cleft lip and palate, and that he had some significant brain abnormalities. And then that first day, we also learned that David would be blind. And that's something you're like, I didn't even know anyone who was blind at that time. You're just like, I can't even reconcile all of these things. And we learned that his cleft lip and palate pattern was just part of a really rare spectrum of disorders that really does point to like a really shortened and limited life, severe cognitive disabilities, high risk for seizures. David has kind of what you could think about as cerebral palsy. So he's not mobile, he's not verbal, and, he eats with a G-tube. So there's a lot when you look at David that looks really scary if you've never interacted with someone with disabilities. He isn't like almost any other kid I've ever met. And so at the time, I just didn't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally felt like the world ended.
Yeah. Well, that's about 7,000 pounds of hard candy, right?
Yeah.
So are you comfortable telling us what your amazing pediatrician, can I say her name?
Yes.
Dr. Clifford, what does she tell you? Because I remember this vividly when you and I talked afterwards. What did she tell you should do once you took David home? Do you remember that?
No, tell me what you're thinking.
This is what I thought she said, that you were rightfully nervous taking him home. And at that time, they were advising you that he's going to have these massive seizures. And then you said to her, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
Do you remember this? Anyway, what she told you was, okay, when he has a seizure, unless I have no memory correctly, but when he has a seizure, you pick him up and you hold him until he dies.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you call me.
Yeah. It was I think, before we left the NICU, I had called her, and I remember this so vividly, just being in the bathroom of the hospital and saying, is he gonna die?
Yeah.
And she was like, Rachel, I just don't know. I don't know. And I appreciated that honesty so much. And what comes back to me is just her willingness to be present with me. And so when we discharged from the NICU, we really did it under, I thought he would die that night. I mean, they were so negative about his prognosis that I was like, we can't stay here anymore. We have to go home. I'll just deal with it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll just deal with it. And we thought that he would die overnight. And she was like, don't call 911. Just wait, spend time with his body and call me. And so I was thinking about this, like, I still went in last night. I was like, is he breathing? And, parents do that with their kids all the time, but it totally took on a different meaning for me with David. And I mean, it was years before I would wake up thinking, oh, this will be the day that I just wake up and he has died. I don't feel that way anymore.
I didn't know that.
But it has taken me many years because the expectation was sort of just so heavy.
Okay, so you have this intensity of horror and fear and vigilance all going on. How long, which is an appropriate first reaction, right? So then, but your cortisol, you can't go on with that forever, right? So did things shift? Did you can you identify if there were shifts early on, or was it just that level for that long?
Well, I think a lot, research shows that parents with disabilities parents of children with disabilities carry like as much stress, they say, as like an ICU physician. So wow. They are like operating because the stakes really are high. And I have 4 other kids. The stakes are not high. Like, I don't care what they have for lunch. I don't really care what time they go to bed. I don't care what they wear. Like, I just don't care. And, but with David, the stakes feel really high, and they feel high because they are high, right? And so there's a physiological response that's appropriate to the significance of those stakes being so high.
Like you having to take him to the hospital for the flu a couple weeks ago.
Like, these things are like real. The risks are real. And so, but I think we'll probably get here, so stop me but if I need to. But I think one of the reasons that parents stay in that high stress state is because they don't have the big picture figured out. And I would say I feel so thankful and blessed that, like, I have never once questioned the purpose of David's life, the worth of David's life, the value of David's life, or what happens to David when he dies. And so I think for so many parents, they could not say that. And that is part of the stress, because it's not just the logistic elements of caring for a child who's profoundly disabled, which are really a lot, right? But it's the underlying instability of who is this person? Why is he here? Does he matter? Is there an answer to this boy's life? And so many parents don't have an answer for that. And so I think that's probably a lot of the underlying tension.
Well, you've opened that door. So how about if we walk through that right now? So let's start with and link. You first find out that he's going to be, they don't know what, but some kind of severe disability. How did you and George, how does that framework that you're talking about help you deal with, and how did you deal with that initially? And then tell me more about your honestly, your worldview.
Yeah, I think, so we know that not just nationwide, but across the world, when parents learn that they're carrying a child who will be very different, there is a very common choice made, and that choice is terminating the life of this child. And unfortunately, that has become a way that parents feel that they are actually like saving or like protecting this child from suffering. I've never operated under that framework, and neither is my husband, and neither did our physicians. And so it was never a question of whether or not we would choose to welcome David. It wasn't a choice. Although David arrived to us, I would say unbidden, it was never a point of our decision whether or not we would receive that. But it was totally accepted between myself and my husband, our community, that we would take David for however long in whatever form. And so that's the first hurdle, right?
So there was a peace.
Absolutely.
Even though there was complete chaos.
Yes, and I think
disappointment and sorrow.
And I'm sure, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but people hear God talk to them in all sorts of weird ways. Even when maybe they don't have a relationship with him, he can sort of appear to us in these times of great need. That's not the case for me. I've been a Christian for many years. God has been faithful to preserve my faith for him through a lot, including this. But in the ultrasound room, I just had this overwhelming spiritual presence. And this is a special baby. And I was like, that doesn't tell me how long David's going to live. That doesn't tell me the quality of his life. That doesn't tell me how hard it's going to be. That doesn't tell me the day he's going to die. But what I do know from that statement is that it's ordained and there's a purpose, and I'm along for David's ride. Like, I'm along for the ride, and someone's watching. Like, it's not like I'm not by myself. And so there's a presence there in that ultrasound room. I still feel that presence. Like, when I look at David, that I know that his life is deeply valuable. It's deeply meaningful. It's been ordained by God for a purpose. It's not like God had a hand in designing all of my regular kids and sort of stepped back, and David came by on the conveyor belt and he was like, whoops, don't know how that got there. Like, that's not how things work in God's world. And so I feel like we never had big questions. We felt a sense of deep peace about the worth and purpose of David's life, and that God would be present with us and with our family, even if it's not at all what we would have wanted it to look like.
So you never attributed to a malevolent purpose. It was always, there's some good purpose here because I trust this God
and
who says he loves me.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is his love.
Yes. And I mean, that's hard candy.
That is hard candy.
That is something, that is a medicine that many people would not take.
Well, I fought against that for a few decades. Yeah.
Yeah.
In different circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, and there's times when you can decide not to take that, right? If it's personal, it has to do with you. But this was a other person who was placed in front of me. It was like an encounter, like a spiritual encounter, I think, to face the presence of David. So
in the suffering, did you find that what happened with your relationship with the Lord when you had all this suffering?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think one way that people fight against the knowledge of the presence of God is by saying, my pain means that there is no God. Because if there was a God, I wouldn't be in pain. This wouldn't have happened. So-and-so wouldn't have died. And this is actually dealt with in the Bible. I was thinking about this. I don't know if your readers or listeners are familiar, but there's a time when Jesus has these friends, and they're a brother and two sisters, and the brother dies, and Jesus is not present. And he comes, and the body has already been put in the tomb, and the sisters come to Jesus and they say, Lord, if you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. And I don't know if that's true. I don't think that that's true. Christ does raise him from the dead, and part of that is to show his power and that he was God. But everybody dies. So God is not here to sort of stop the effects of what we would call sin from how they work in the world in an individual sense, but in a corporate sense. Yes, he's reconciled all things to himself. He's coming back, and he's given us in our pain a person, not an answer. And that's the person of Christ. And so that's why I said the presence in the ultrasound room, the presence of God in David. God answers our questions about pain with presence. That's just what I keep coming back to. It's like, I don't know how this is going to be, but God is with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in that story that you're talking about, the sister saying that Jesus, he wouldn't have died if you were here, shows their worldview, which we all have, because well, why should we have to suffer?
Yeah. Why?
Right. And
isn't it your job to get me out of this?
Right. Aren't you Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Right. But, okay, great. So, can I ask you this, and no names or anything, but when you were finding out about everything and living in it, did people do anything what did people do that was particularly helpful, and what did people do, or were there instances where people were particularly unhelpful? Maybe well-meaning, but
I love this contrast, because we talked about this most recently in sort of like a Sunday school context with one of our pastors, but people love to say things like, oh, God will never give you more than you can handle. Sorry, I don't know where they got that. Right. Not true.
Oh, really?
And usually that statement is followed up with, and you're such a strong person, you can do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way of creating a lot of distance between yourself and the person that is standing in front of you suffering, because you're like, if I'm not like them, then this won't happen to me, because maybe they got like cosmically picked for this because of some good attribute, and I'm just going to be like false humility and hopefully skirt this happening to me. And so it ends up being much more common about themselves than about the person, right?
Well, and they don't want to be in a mess. They don't want to have to do something.
No.
Yeah.
And so that, those comments are really hurtful and really just don't have a basis.
What did you say when they did
probably
stuff like
nothing.
That? Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't know if it's worth
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to save my energy.
Yeah.
Here. But the things that were really helpful, going back to this theme of presence, is people who didn't ask. I don't love it when folks are like, what, unless they're really close, what would be helpful? Because then I can actually say, but if they're not close and they're like, let me know if you need help, I'm like, I'm just never going to do that. And so there was lots of people who just dropped things off. Like someone put like a $500 gift card to a grocery store in our mailbox. Maybe it was you.
No, it wasn't.
Maybe it was Joan.
No. I'd love to take credit for it. That's a great idea. I didn't even think about it.
That to us at the time was like this massive amount of money. And we just didn't even know what to do with that. That was amazing. Someone else, a young guy, actually, one of George's friends, gave us like, I think he gave us a gift card to go out to eat, and he gave me a spa gift card, which was like so.
Did you use it?
Yeah, and it was so amazing. It was so thoughtful. People gave us, just dropped food off, like without asking me, which I'm just not going to ask.
Right.
Because I think when people are like, let me know if you need anything, that's like they are saying something so they feel like they asked you, but it's not really anything.
I totally agree.
So the people who just did stuff is much more my team.
Yeah.
I'm like,
and your family really came around.
I mean,
too.
yeah, my parents were, living in a town like 2 hours away, and my parents bought a house on my street. So I'm like, okay.
And your David is named after
your dad. My dad.
Yeah.
So that's presence right there. My parents were like, well, we'll just move here. I'm like, okay. I didn't,
Yeah. That's
really powerful.
Great. That's really, really sharing the sufferings and getting the joy from it too,
Yeah. People who were determined to sort of be there for the long haul.
Yeah. Right.
Not just in the moment of crisis, because kind of everybody likes to watch the crisis, right?
Yeah,
but people
rubbernecking.
Stick around.
Okay, so then you hinted at it a little bit, like you took a spa afternoon, right, or a spa hour or something. But what did you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I think about that. I walked a lot. And so while I was still pregnant with David, I would walk like 2 or 3 times a day. And that's just this time that I was very silent before the Lord. Just no distractions, no music, no phone, nothing. And I really needed that space. And so I think one way that we sort of can engage with God is in nature, very powerful, just to be outside and to feel alone except for the presence of the Lord is something that was really important to me. So
like clear your head.
Yes. And I just had to.
David got the GI tube. I remember that feeding him and keeping his weight up was just so difficult with multiple surgeries and all that stuff.
I think, and George and I, my husband and I talk about this. Sometimes you look back and you can't imagine what you did and how you did it for so long. And that's like God's provision, because if you'd asked me to do some of those things today, I don't think I could do them. So, God really sustained us, but I think there's an acclimation part, but there's also, he's gotten older and stronger, right? So that's,
tell us a little bit about this. This is the miracle to me, was how Rachel and her husband, George, dealt with the whole thing. But that is not the only miracle that's going on. You gotta say this.
Yeah. I feel like David is just, at every turn has just surprised not only us who, see him every day, but his therapists, his school teachers, our friends, people that love him. He has like sort of a really quiet tenacity, because things that are easy for us, right? Like eating, breathing, walking are really hard for David. And so his whole day is focused around basic skills that you and I mastered like when we were 1 year old. And he doesn't complain. He's never like challenging to please or like in a bad mood. We just don't recognize that in David. He's just like quietly, working very hard to do very simple things. And over time, those tiny little inchworm increments pay these huge dividends. So he's doing things like starting to stand on his own with lots of support. Hopefully someday he'll be able to walk, like even just a couple steps to transfer in and out of chairs. He has an iPad. He knows, we realized like his receptive language is really high. So he probably knows most of what people say to him. He can't respond to you in a way that, you know, we would recognize as a response, but he knows what's going on. And so that,
and there's more hearing that you thought that it might be,
and more sight, and and we don't know what it's like inside David's head, right? We don't know what he sees, we don't know what he hears, but his ability to communicate with us, even in just simple yes, no, like hitting it on his iPad, he's like highly accurate. And so that's really amazing. It's just amazing to watch.
It's shocking.
Yeah,
it's really shocking
to watch God's provision, and it's done in a village. And you know, Joan and Ray are part of that village. He has this amazing, like, he's in therapy so many times a week. People who have known him for years, who really are just spending time in my house and getting David to, like, we're just going to work on standing again today. We've been working on this for 2 years.
Wow.
So it is like a long, like, yeah, this is the work I get to do with him for the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is a privilege.
How do the other kids interact with him?
Yeah, I think they have just totally normalized it. They're not concerned about the presence of David. And I hope for my children that as they go through their life, they will have learned that these moments where it feels like your world has ended and everything has changed doesn't unseat our foundational beliefs or who we know God has made us to be, but that they can be like, oh, I know what this looks like. I saw my parents do it. I had, like, does not scare me. And that's just a really powerful, like, catechesis that I hope they're able to carry for the next, 80 years.
It is a gift. It is a gift. Wow. Okay. So I'm just a little bit overwhelmed. I'm just kind of taking it in. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think, wow, I wish somebody knew this? And if not, that's okay.
Yeah, I think, again, just going back to these, and this is something I'm kind of working on in my own work, but I think there's a temptation to think that when we face these moments of crisis, that I keep going back to this, like, loss of identity, that is something negative. And I actually don't think that that's true. I think that's part of how this works. And so it's not a bad thing to not recognize yourself anymore. I'm like, that's how, like, that might be the point of this.
Yeah. And it's so, like, it's not a bad thing. It's just a very hard thing.
It's very hard.
But you keep going through oh, rats, it's not this. Oh, rats, it's not this. But here it is.
Yeah. And I'm like,
here's that person.
That's a gift.
Jesus,
and so, I've always heard people say, oh, I can never imagine this being any other way. And I can honestly say that that's true. Do I want David to struggle to do very basic things? No. Do I want his life to be challenging and short? No. Would I ask God to, like, rewind this so that I think the last thing is, I think people think there's an alternative reality where these things wouldn't have happened if, and that's just not true. It's just not true. There's no such world where David would have been a normal 4-year-old boy. Yeah. And so then what if I could just rewind it and David would have never happened? I'm like, we wouldn't be the same people. I could never, in my own wisdom, think that would be the best choice. Yeah. And that just learning again that there's never a reality where this wouldn't have been the case is very helpful, because that allows you to not feel sort of like victimized by it happening to you.
Right. Surrender and gratitude make a huge shift in getting that taste of the sweetness and the ongoing sweetness that you keep dealing with the hard candy, because you still have hard candy.
Yeah, never is going to go away.
Right.
But my response to it is like, maybe I could be the sort of person who's like, thank you for allowing me to experience David, versus why was I visited with this tragedy?
Exactly.
Therefore, I'll turn away from you.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I love
Thanks
you,
for
Rachel.
having me.
It's been great talking with you, and I really appreciate you and being able to witness the ongoing miracles of what God is doing.
Thanks.
It's pretty cool.
Thank you.